That is the beginning of the Boccage. There's little hedges out there. We're just on the edge of the Utah beach periphery, and the Boccage starts here and moves back in, so the hedges get thicker. You can see why it caused the Americans and the British such extraordinary difficulty getting infantry and tanks through here. It's just a defender's paradise. And this is our room. It's in a kind of a chateau farmhousey thing. Is that nice? This is the Boccage country in Normandy. We're at the periphery really. It gets thicker further north. From here the fields get even smaller and the hedgerows get thicker, but it gives you a pretty good idea of why it took the US forces so long and why it was so expensive in casualties to break out of this part of the country. Any private soldier straight off basic training will look at this ground and recognise it for what it is, which is a beautifully designed killing ground for infantry. There's cover everywhere, concealment is unlimited, lousy fields of fire for people attacking, very difficult for command and control. You would be hard pressed to control a section, let alone a platoon or company or battalion. The distances across the fields are almost picture perfect, ideal range for things like Panzerfaust and Panzerschreck. Tanks, armoured vehicles in this sort of environment are completely helpless unless they've got infantry around them and in front of them. In addition to it being infinitely ambushable, they also had great problems actually getting across through the hedgerows themselves, because in places they're 5 or 6 feet thick and at least 3 or 4 feet off the deck. So until they came up with their system of attaching cutting blades to the front of the tanks, they had real problems even getting armoured vehicles through this stuff. It's a defender's paradise, and if you're up against somebody as good as the Germans, as well versed as they were with small unit initiative and stickability, you've got a real problem on your hands. The other problem that they had was to do with communications. It's difficult because you can't see anything, or what you can see you're very limited to what you can see and therefore control, but also the radios here. The radios of the day only worked out to a range of about 5 kilometres, but Normandy is pretty much pancake country, there's no high ground, and the radio signals radiating out went straight up into the atmosphere as opposed to being able to bounce off things like hills. And consequently the effective range of the radios was often down to only a kilometre or so. And in addition, this vegetation is wonderful for blotting up radio signals, so in amongst this crap your comms was down to maybe 100, 200 metres at times. So for people like company commanders, battalion commanders, it was well nigh impossible to influence events. So it was very much an infantryman, small unit, NCO type operation, even given that you've got a section tasked to advance across that field and maintain your bearings and keep in direction and maintain yourself relative to the other formations around you. It's a tactical nightmare, because every single direction you look, you've got opportunities to be taken in the flank by fire. Everywhere you look as an opportunity to go flanking, you're probably going to bump into something nasty on the way. So divisions like the 4th US Division that came ashore at Utah with very, very few casualties found themselves tangled up in this country pretty quickly, and their casualties started to mount to the point that by the end of the war they had sustained second highest level of casualties of any US division committed to battle during the Second World War. Hopefully on the way out we'll go through some of the really, really thick stuff and it'll give you a better impression of of the Boccage itself, but also there's stone walls like this all over the place, and buildings like the one we're staying in, which are effectively bunkers. Several feet of solid rock, completely impervious to small arms fire, and perfectly capable of blotting up 10 or 20 rounds of 105mm howitzer ammunition without doing that much damage. So in addition to the natural opportunities for ambush and concealment, the Germans also had the ability to fortify and make improvised bunkers out of all the farm structures around here. So it's a real bloody nightmare of a place to have to fight. There's the farmhouse we're staying in. Very, very nice stay. But the other point to note about why it took the Americans so long to get through this area is that it completely negated the advantage that they had with air support. From the air, all these fields look identical, and very difficult to identify enemy positions as well as your friendly lines. So bringing close air support in with the Typhoons and the P-47s and the other American and British fighter bombers was almost impossible until the British started using forward air observers attached to the infantry units who could control and direct aircraft. But even at that point, even when you've got people that know what they're doing, this is an extremely confusing, difficult to control, difficult to identify, and bloody difficult to fight your way through piece of real estate.